Hi, and welcome to the Fierce Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Brigette Gildemaster. This is a podcast for those who are ready to leave behind survival mode after abuse, where we talk about what it looks like to embody who you are as an individual, learn to love yourself, and bring to light healing after surviving abuse from relationships and religion. Pop your earbuds in to hear heartfelt and powerful intensity from myself and guests. Be ready to put into place actual tools and gather insight for you to use on your healing journey. I'm excited for her to be on because she's bringing a tool that we haven't had yet on the podcast, and that's communication, which is absolutely wonderful. I think I haven't run into another communication coach yet, and so I think that this is much needed in our communities and virtually because so much, I think things get thrown around all the time in conversation, and I think we do struggle with communication, especially this technology world that we have. So welcome, Katie. I'm excited to get started.
Thank you so much, Brigette. I am super excited to kind of kick off the communication conversation, if you will.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So let's dive in. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
So as you mentioned, I'm a communication coach, but that is kind of a newer service that I've been developing over the past year or so. With my practice, I have been a licensed therapist for about 9 years. And prior to that, so I should say I've been a licensed mental health therapist for the past 9 years. Prior to that, for 8 years, I was a licensed massage therapist. So I do have a background in kind of complementary and alternative medicine and healing, and it has certainly served me well in not just the therapeutic work that I do, but really having a very deep sense of understanding of nonverbal communication and really connecting with the body and just how we can communicate so much without words, and how our body can communicate with us and how we can communicate with it. There's like so much to it. I am also the mental health ambassador for Responders for Pride, which is a really amazing organization here in, I'm in Maryland. And so they're based out of Maryland, and they are they're a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to offering support and resources to the LGBTQIA first responder community, which is a community very near and dear to my heart. My wife is a law enforcement, no longer an officer. She was an officer for a long time. She's a detective now, and she gets very snippy if I get that wrong. But she's a first responder, and so it's a very important kind of element of my life and area of the work that I do. But in terms of communication coaching, I really love to help people, individuals particularly, feel empowered to be able to engage and interact in their relationships, whether it be romantic relationships, family relationships, professional relationships, but just be able to engage and interact just more effectively, giving them the tools and the self-awareness through exploration to be able to show up in their relationships and have the types of relationships they want, be able to make change in their relationships and in the dynamics, and feel empowered to know that they don't have to wait for the other person to change in order for their relationships in order to cultivate the relationships that they really want to have.
Yeah. Oh my God. I loved everything you said. And I love that you're a massage therapist. So so my background, I have health coaching too. So, which most people don't know because of what I do, but so that intuitiveness and that connection with the body and everything too. I love that is part of your background, because I can only imagine how much more actually having hands-on, so to speak, experience with the communication and the body like that. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for the time that I was an LMT, and it just taught me so much. And what's cool is that it taught me so much that I didn't even know I was learning until I really have been able to apply it, further down the road, more recently in more recent years. So it's so cool. It's like still showing up and helping me, even though I don't do it professionally anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Cause I mean, just our intuition alone, I think, especially as women, we have shoved and it's been shoved down so hard. And I'm still digging up pieces of it and just constantly like, oh yeah, I get it. I get that connection now. So that's super cool. Um, how have you seen that manifest more with coaching? So I would love to talk about that, like that body language aspect of it, if you don't mind starting off there.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
a big part of the coaching that I do is centered around helping my client gain some self-awareness, gain some insight into how their internal kind of world, so to speak, is communicating with them, right? So being able to know what we want and what we need in our relationships really does require us to kind of go inward and explore and get an idea of like what is comfortable for us, what is uncomfortable for us, what is fulfilling for us, what is threatening for us. And we have a tendency to get stuck up in the cognitive space, right up in that like prefrontal cortex brain. And that's really what we're trained to do in our culture. And it's very reinforced and rewarded to just be the thinkers, right? And very analytical. But it's really also about like present moment awareness with what our full whole self experience is communicating to us to help us figure out, okay, so if this is how I'm feeling, how can I bridge this gap and ask for what I need in my relationship? If I need more, I don't know, like verbal affirmation or encouragement in my relationship, how do I ask for that? You know, now that I know that's something I need and that's something I would thrive on, how can I make that happen? How can I effectively make that request so that I actually get what I need, or at least have a better chance to have the bet? And that's what I tell people is communication coaching really focuses on what we can control. And so we can't control how another person's going to respond or respect our boundaries or not, but it gives us the best chance. It increases the likelihood as much as possible that we can cultivate the change that we need.
Yeah, well, and to know that you're doing the best you can also shows you their personality at its best. Like to be sure of yourself and be like, yeah, no, I'm confident and this is what I need and how I feel. You know, I'm not second guessing that I'm in, as like my case, coming out of situations, I'm not in fight or flight mode. I'm not, and I am solid in my understanding of what I need right now is
Mhm.
super powerful.
Yeah, very, very important for us to not just cultivate the relationships that we want and need, but I think to cultivate the relationship with ourselves, right? That's going to be the healthiest and wisest relationship that we can have with ourselves, right? Knowing what kind of touch, is safe for us, knowing where we want to be able to get with touch, and like having a clearer perspective of things like that. It's so important to be able to practice that, process of going inward and understanding what our body is communicating to us so that we can then communicate that to the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, that self-love. Oh my gosh. I love everything you had to say about that. So in that, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on stuff like that? Like coming from, romantic abuse and stuff like that, the first thing people say to better your communications are the five love languages and figure out what you need. You kind of touched on that a little bit. Like, what are your opinions of things like that in a relationship?
You mean like the kind of the space of how to use things like the love languages to help
Yeah.
the recovery process?
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can recover from relational and romantic abuse and trauma. And I think it's really important that anybody in recovery try to frame their journey almost from like an experimental perspective of like let me see what I'm drawn to and let me give that a try and see if it fits, see if it feels safe, see if it resonates with what I feel like I'm needing right now. And sometimes that is information and tools like the love languages. But it's not always, and so, I mean, for me, first and foremost, I encourage people to start that process of like kind of looking inward and getting a sense, even if it's just like a gut feeling of like, this is not resonating with me and I don't know why, but it seems like crap. And so I'm just pushing it away. And instead of trying to force ourselves to like embrace something like the love languages, I think that you could kind of just put a pin in that and say, well, maybe one day I'll find that useful. Maybe one day I'll be at a place where this fits. It's not right now. And that is okay. We want to kind of respect where you're at and where you're at in the process,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Super powerful right there. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. What's been your experience? So you mentioned working with first responders and getting them help and stuff. What has been your experience with helping just open that door to people who are resistant, if you do have a partner who's resistant or just someone in that field that is, having a hard time coming through the door, like you said, where we were chatting.
Yeah. I think it's so important to meet people where they're at and to let that be okay. And so one thing I've learned a lot about like the first responder community and just kind of on from different angles on many levels, but and it's not exclusive to this community, but one thing that some people struggle with is the idea that if I change how I am operating, everything's going to come crashing down. Like the scaffolding of my safety is so fragile. And I don't think that there's an awareness of that. I don't think they're thinking like, if I open this Pandora's box of emotions, it's going to be too much. No, this is not the inner dialogue usually. But there is behavior that really shows us what someone is and is not ready for, right? So they might not come out and be like, I'm not ready for therapy, but I would consider this. It's more like, no, insert whatever judgment or narrative or preconceived idea of a certain type of help is, but then it's also like, well, what do you think about like a more problem solving oriented approach? Like if we just picked a particular topic that is really bothering you and just worked together to try and solve it, that's more appealing. Well, for coaching is present oriented, it's goal oriented, right? And so is therapy is also goal oriented, but but the difference is that coaching is present focused and we're not processing, where we are more problem solving. We are more about like kind of a more short-term problem solving approach to the identified struggle, right? That appeals to a lot of people, including, a lot of my first responder community who their strengths, part of their strengths is problem solving. Like their day-to-day work life is get put into chaos and find a way to organize it, find a way to solve the problem, find a way to de-escalate the situation, find a way to get home safe, right? So they're just so conditioned to look at situations like a problem to be solved that if we take that framework, it's a lot more relatable, it's a lot more familiar, and it can be just more useful to get them in the door of recognizing that they can make change in their life. They don't have to just keep feeling stuck and more like a pressure cooker of, these dynamics, especially the dynamics at home that can wind up being affected by things like spillover and trauma.
Yeah. So, and with that type of person that is, high stress level position, high stress, demands, like obviously lives on the line. It's a lot encompassing that. I feel like they would also just be, they compartmentalize, so to speak, their own emotions and problems. And so, to get, what do you feel like to get sorry, let me rephrase that. What you were talking about with like, don't rock the boat and shake things up to break that open. They're kind of in a avoidant state as well from those emotions.
Yeah. 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 Was there a particular question?
No, not really. Just an
Oh,
observation. Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. There's such a complexity around how people adapt
Mhm.
to traumatic situations. And if we all stop and think about it, we all have adaptive strategies that we've developed, whether it's from abuse we endured as children, whether it was, misattunement and emotional neglect from our parents, whether it was relational abuse or some kind of event related trauma, in adulthood. I don't think that any of us get out unscathed when it comes to just being a human and experiencing traumatic events, but we all have this adaptive capacity to get ourselves through it. One of those things is the capacity to compartmentalize for some of us and to be able to just put really overwhelming internal experiences in their boxes inside. And for first responders, especially anybody who's just reliving trauma, chronic trauma day after day as a part of their job, I get why they keep that a really a very clean, tight, internalized, compartmentalized kind of state, because otherwise I imagine that they feel like just even a crack open of one of those boxes and it's all just gonna come falling down. And that's not useful either. It's not useful to overwhelm our system. So that's why we have to be really mindful of when we're doing trauma work and just helping people recover, because um, it's really easy to overwhelm people in the process and potentially re-traumatize them depending on what the experience is like, and we want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And from all aspects of, because of their jobs, also their personal emotions. I love how you said that too. Like it all just kind of gets put in these places. So, yeah. How do you see that affecting their communication, and how does that work play into what you do then?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I always kind of say that, like, a joke that communication is one of the first casualties, because um, communication is everything. That is how we relate to other people. That is how we connect to other people, is we communicate. We communicate in every way, and every behavior is a communication. Things that we don't do are a communication, right? So it's kind of just, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And then when you add another person into the mix, right? When you add another person who's bringing their own kind of past and narratives and traumas and experiences, it becomes so messy so quickly. So, I mean, a lot of the work that I've done with partners of first responders have very common struggles that they share about. For example, the spillover that leads to their partner suddenly treating them more like a suspect than a teammate or someone that they love, but kind of feeling like communication or conversations turn into interrogations. I even I shared with my community a little while back that I had my own experience with my wife a couple years ago, where I was like, well, it was actually more than a couple years ago now, but it was back when she was in patrol, and we were having some kind of argument, conflict. And I noticed in that moment, I was like, what is happening? I'm a pretty decent communicator. I'll just say that, and as a therapist, I kind of pride myself on being able to, like, navigate conflict. Now, of course, this is my personal life, which is a little bit different, but in this moment, I remember thinking, like, what is happening right now? Because I feel like I'm being spun in circles. She's being so evasive. What is happening? Wait, what? And I was so confused, but instead of kind of doing the same old dance, I stopped and I was like, I don't know what is happening right now, but I feel like you are using your words to spin me around. I'm feeling very confused and a bit manipulated, and I don't know what's happening, but it just kind of feels like you're using your words to, like, win this conversation. And I think the way that I said it, along with the words that I chose, which on a different day may have led to more conflict, but on this day, she stopped and she like completely changed her facial expression to like a shock, kind of surprise, like realization type of expression. And she was like, oh shit, I'm using verbal judo on you. And I was like, what is that? Now, I kind of put together just by the title of it what it might be, but the curiosity really helped expand the conversation to a more neutral territory. Like I was able to say, be curious about the realization she just had instead of just being like, well, whatever you're doing, stop because it's messed up or whatever. Instead, I was like, well, what is that? What do you mean? Like, tell me more. And we wound up going in a totally different direction. And she was like, it's something like that we're taught. It helps us with de-escalation and the whole idea, especially when you're working with people on the streets, whether you're in law enforcement or your EMS or firefighter, I mean, they all have to deal with people in real time in the most chaotic, traumatic moments of their lives. And so it's a skill that I think a lot of people use that are in those situations. But, she was like, this is something we are taught so that we do win, because winning means de-escalating, getting everyone where they need to be and getting out alive. And something that we both took away from that was that conflict at home between us was being translated in her brain as threat to life. And her conditioned behaviors and responses kick in without her realizing it. And suddenly the dynamic is not one of loving partners. It's one of, suspect cop. And it really changed from there. I mean, like just that realization helped us to chip away at that dynamic that we had gotten so stuck in. And it's something that I really don't I feel like we have, we've been able to avoid returning to. So I hope that answered your question. I know that was a little bit of a detour.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, that was the perfect answer to my question. Like, yeah, I can totally see how they bring work home to those conversations, whether it's, whoever in the family. And so excuse me. Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. Yeah, what tools have you ever used going forward with that now that you were able to recognize what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, so on my end, I have to be very careful of my tone of voice, because there are certain things that I do either non-verbally with my face, because I'm very expressive with my face, and I'm very gesticulate. Like I gesticulate and I'm very expressive. It's a cultural thing that how I grew up and kind of where I come from. But she does not. She's the opposite of that, and so my gestures, my facial expressions, and my tone of voice tend to be it can be very triggering to her. And so that's something that on my end I had to really learn how to pay attention to and change so that I could be more effective in communicating with my partner. It's not about changing who I am. I still use my hands. I still use all kinds of tones, but I'm more mindful of the moment and the situation. And if I'm trying to actually resolve something with her and get to the other side where we can feel connected again and safe again and find compromise, right? I have to be willing to make those adjustments to the way I communicate so that I can be more effective. I can actually be successful in reaching that outcome, or at least I can, again, increase the likelihood as much as possible that will happen. And what's cool is that we have this effect on each other. We influence how each other feels and behaves. And part of that is our mirror neurons at work that assist us with reflecting back what we see in other people. And that's not just like the nonverbals, but that's also like emotionally speaking. If you've ever been across from somebody who's crying and suddenly you feel your tears starting to well up in your eyes, those are your mirror neurons at work. You start to feel that feeling. It's an empathy builder. Our mirror neurons is kind of like the neurobiological side of our empathy. And so there's that's at play, right? And we can influence each other really successful, but we can also escalate each other, right? So like we can influence each other to de-escalate, but we can also escalate each other. And so what I have found is that, you know, when I make those adjustments, I can literally watch her like soften and breathe and become less tense physically and start to take care of herself. Like all she really needs is that sense of like safety in that moment of, okay, Katie's not going to escalate this further. She's going to stay kind of grounded. And that's kind of what can kick off a phenomenon called co-regulation, where we offer each other a regulated state by regulating ourselves. And slowly we can come back together in a state that is more loving and kind and empathic and able to, you know, continue the conversation or, you know, just stay effective in the communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that she is, yeah, like you said, I love everything you said about reciprocating of it. And you're clearly moving forward, and it didn't continue to be just a different circle, you know, so many times if one partner is trying in an unhealthy relationship, obviously, you know, you'll just do a different dance and, you know, go from there. But the fact that you've built on that is so beautiful. I love that so much. And yeah.
And let me tell you what, you know, every stride that we've had personally in our relationship has been one that we kind of look back in awe and we're like, wow, because you know, we've had some serious struggles in our relationship, and it's just kind of, it's very fascinating and very hopeful. You know, we have a lot of gratitude for where we've made it, given that, you know, this first responder life is pretty hard, and it can come with so many challenges that that will really threaten the relationship being able to be sustainable. So we're always just very grateful and proud of each other that we've been able to navigate.
That's awesome. Yeah. And to reach that level of saying, hey, I think this is what's going on, and be able to talk about it, and instead of
Yeah.
being like, oh, why are you accusing me of, you know, like, because,
Yeah.
yeah, I know I have very close family that is, you know, police officers and stuff. And so I know that that is, you know, that is really rough, you know, to bring that home and to separate those two. So that's just amazing that you're able to have those skills and expand on them like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it did not happen overnight. It was a lot of work for many years.
Yeah.
Just to preface.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So tell me a little bit more about like your coaching that you offer. So if someone wanted to coach with you, kind of what that would look like, and you know, on from there. So
Yeah. So I like to highlight that I offer a lot of free resources as well as my services that you can kind of connect to me more one-on-one, and those are paid services. But for like the free services I do have a free Facebook group called Communication Skills for Connection, and that's a kind of a growing and building community. I launched that just this past January 1st. So that's kind of a new addition, but it's been amazing. And it's an educational group. It is all about, you know, finding a safe space for education and support around the communication struggles and the communication topics that, you know, are really relevant to people's day-to-day life, you know, what people really want to learn about. And so I do a weekly communication lab that is like a live lab where the community they poll and they pick a topic, and I provide some education and some kind of tips and strategies for that particular topic. And as well as I have some freebies that you can download. Those freebies are more like first responder geared, but would be helpful for anybody. So that's another resource that's free that that I think is very useful for people. And then I also have a bunch of other free resources for like coping skills and things like that, kind of the more mental health side of things on my website, katiebingner.com. But as for paid services, I do one-on-one coaching right now. That's subject to expand in the future. I might wind up exploring doing some like group coaching this year, I think. But for right now, it's one-on-one. And there's kind of two paths that you can take. You can take like more of a like a as needed approach where you kind of book with me during the times where you're feeling like you really need help, strategies, tackling this one thing that's happening right now in your life, and just kind of checking in on that level. And then there's like a package path where if there's like a particular goal you have in mind, right? Like I really need to be able to communicate to my partner about, our sex life. And I'm uncomfortable talking about sex, number one. And I know my partner's uncomfortable talking about sex. I don't know how to even bring up the topic, right? And so we would set a goal specific to that. And it's an 8-week package where you get 6 sessions over the span of 8 weeks. You even get one for free. So you pay for 5 sessions, you get 6, and we do all the things to get you to that goal. And yeah, the idea there is that we make it a manageable goal so that you are as best as possible able to reach that goal by the end of that 8-week period.
Awesome. Fabulous. And then you do speaking as well, right?
I do, yeah. That is also one of kind of like the newer additions, but I am gonna be at the Smart Recovery Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, in April, on April 4th. If anybody is in the Salt Lake City area and you are dealing with yourself, or if you have a loved one who's dealing with addiction or addictive behavior, Smart Recovery is a really fantastic community and resource, and that might be something of interest to you. But yeah, I'll be there talking about communication and being able to maintain connection with our loved ones who are struggling with addiction, and really addressing that pressure that families and loved ones feel to kind of cut people off and out of their lives under the guise of boundary setting. And so just like really, we're going to be exploring the nuances of boundary setting and how people can still try to maintain connection. There's like space, there's gray area between that kind of all or nothing thinking of like, I either have to just constantly bail my loved one out and just be there all the time, or close them off and cut them off completely. And so I'm going to try and highlight the middle ground of that with using communication as the primary tool there.
Awesome. So a lot of boundary talk too, it sounds like. So that sounds fabulous. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Cool. Well, great. Do you I feel like, so if this is a little far ahead, but do you have any plans for a book or anything like that in the works in the future? You sound like you're well on your way. So
I do have a blog on my website. I do like a little bit of writing, but it's mostly just, it's focused on mental health and communication. So I've also been featured in some different publications. But in terms of a book, it's funny that you asked that, because I started writing a bit of a memoir, but it's kind of a passion project. It's kind of like a more personal project, and it's kind of in its like infant stages, but that is something that's kind of percolating in the background. Who knows where it'll go?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's how my journaling always ends up. It's in chapter form, but for nobody else but me.
Who knows if anyone will ever see it, but you never know. I'm always open to the possibility.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I think you'd have an amazing book. I really do. So that's awesome.
That's so kind. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a lot to offer. Yeah, so what are your social media handles? You mentioned your website already, and I'll drop all this in the show notes when this goes out, but you can say them so that people can find you as well.
Yeah, I am on TikTok as unfiltered_therapist, and I am on Facebook. So my name, I have like a regular profile, Katie Bingner, and then I also have like a business page, which is Katie Bingner Coaching LLC, and they're linked together. So if you find one, you'll find both. And then I'm also on Instagram. It's at Katie B Coaching.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, fabulous. Got the basics. That's all I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Well, cool. Well, I want to respect your time too. So I will close this off, but I really appreciate you being on here today. Yeah, you just have a different aspect to all of this that I hadn't heard yet. And so I'm really excited to now I follow you and see where your journey goes to a little bit more. So
Oh, that's so, I really appreciate you having me. And that's so kind of you to say. Thanks so much. This was awesome.
Thank you for joining us today on the Fierce Voice podcast. I truly hope you found healing insight, tools, and a space held for you in this journey. We are all in this together, and you are not alone. You can find me, your host, Brigette Gildemaster, on all social media platforms, and check out my website at www.brigittegildemaster.com, where you can listen to past Fierce Voice episodes, check out my media features, find my books, and inquire about booking me for your next virtual or in-person event. My keynotes are impactful with real-life stories, actionable tools, and inspiration for healing after a life-altering experience. Or check out my workshop event to learn more about how you can prevent abuse in your area. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you next time on the Fierce Voice Podcast.